All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you again for everyone for being here today. I'm Molly McGurry, the Events and Programs Manager. This forum is for all of you to ask questions. Any questions that you might have, any concerns, we definitely encourage it. If you hover your mouse over the participants button, you will see in the bottom right-hand corner a raise your hand feature, which will allow you to ask questions live to our speakers. If you don't feel comfortable asking them live, we also have a chat function. So you can chatter those questions in. Myself and Brenda will be watching that box constantly to make sure any questions that you have are being answered. So on that note, I would now like to turn it over to Brenda Mcclellan. Thanks, Brenda, for being here.
Thanks, Molly. Hi, everyone. I see so many familiar names and faces out there. Good to see all of you. I am Brenda Mcclellan, and I am the Director of Investor Engagement at Travelers Connect, and I feel like we've had our own forum in the last 10 minutes with Lee and Randy. Thank you both for coming on board. And I just want to give you all a little background on both of our speakers today. And I'll start with you, Randy. Randy Boss is a certified risk architect at Ottawa Kent Insurance. Randy utilizes over 40 years experience in designing, building, and implementing risk management and insurance plans for middle market companies in the areas of human resources, property, liability, workers' comp, safety, and benefits. He has been with Ottawa Kent for 38 years, earning in that time the designations of Certified and Licensed Insurance Counselor, Senior Professional in Human Resources, Certified Work Comp Advisor, Construction Risk and Insurance Specialist, Certified Benefits and Wellness Advisor, Safety Management Specialist, Certified Risk Architect and Manager. Along with working with his clients, Randy oversees sales management and training for 10 risk advisors at Ottawa Kent. He serves on the board of the Family Business Alliance, as well as board of ABC West Michigan, and chairs the Safety Committee. And Lee Schwartz is the Executive Vice President for Government Relations for the Home Builders Association of Michigan. Lee starts his 30th year with them on May 5th and is on his 41st year of being involved in Lansing. Lee served as staff in both the House and Senate, was the Public Relations Government Affairs Head for Century Telephone, which is now CenturyLink, in Michigan and Indiana, and headed up government relations for the Small Business Association of Michigan before joining the Home Builders. So gentlemen, thank you for being with us today to speak to our group here, and I'll let you take it away, Randy. Thank you.
Good. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I'm like you. I'm getting pretty used to doing Zoom meetings. So it's yeah, challenging times, interesting times. I would have never realized that we would be facing something like this. However, if you go back to 2007, 2009, right in that range, there was actually a pandemic that was starting to break out called the bird flu. And once I had heard about it, I was actually warning people that they needed a response plan for that. Well, talked to several human resource folks and worked on quite a few plans, but it never really took off. And fortunately, they came up with a vaccine shortly after that. And there was only 12,000 people that passed in the United States. But once we get through this, this is really something that has to be on our plate to make sure that we have a response for this. So what I've been doing actually this past month, while a lot of people have been sheltering in place or whatever you want to call it, I've been fortunate to be able to come into the office. We have a small crew with our insurance agency. We have 4 offices, probably have 15 people in our offices, and the rest are working remotely. But I've been working on getting people prepared for coming back to work. And the way I've described it is there's really 3 phases to a, any kind of a challenge, or you want to call it a disaster. The before, the during, and after. Well, we probably were not well prepared for the before. This thing came on so quickly. And we're in the during right now, but I'm seeing we're going to be in the after very soon. So one thing I've noticed the last couple of weeks, we're close to Grand Rapids. Things were really super quiet, but there is a lot of activity starting to go up. People are starting to go into work. So this is good timing to plan for the after. And, you know, so I've been working with companies on their safety plans. You know, so I would, if you don't have a return to work or we call it an exposure prevention, preparedness, and response plan, I've got a couple of them that are very good. I've also wrote an article in the Grand Rapids Business Journal that lays out the steps of the plan. And, you know, basically what we've got is we've got just the areas of how do you handle the people portion of it. You've got basically the responsibilities of the management team. So we were talking about this earlier, is when you have a plan, it's just a piece of paper. So once you've adopted a plan, then you need to have some kind of procedure of how you implement that plan. And then from there, you got to have some accountability. So the first thing that's super important is to have buy-in by senior leadership. That's what's going to drive the plan. And then secondly, you know, what are the responsibilities of your managers and supervisors from there? And then the employees have a responsibility for what they need to do. And then you're going to need some job site protective measures, which are going to be very important. And you're also going to have that talks about job site visitors and things. And then you're going to need to have some type of job site cleaning and disinfecting plan. And then from there, you're going to have, and this one is real important as well, job site exposure situations. There's basically 3 types of scenarios that you can have. You can have an employee exhibiting symptoms. You can have someone that tests positive. And then you can have someone that comes in close contact with. So regardless of how you feel, how infectious this is an invisible thing in your workplace. And give you an example of how it can affect your product production, your productivity is, last week I got a call from a client. They were essential, so they had people working, and they lost 6 people to quarantine for 14 days because one person had tested positive. So that's the type of thing you really got to think about. And then, of course, then you got to know a little bit about OSHA record keeping. That's something to be conscious of. There's a whole lot of confidentiality issues that go around all of this when you're dealing with it. So I guess to kind of summarize what you need in your plan is, you know, just make sure that you have a written plan, number one, customize it for your workplace. Secondly, make sure that you have training around that plan. And then finally, that you have some type of an accountability. And one thing I'm a big believer in is when it comes to safety is behavioral safety. And I guess the way I describe that is if you can give 3 attaboys or attagirls and 1 criticism, you're going to win when it comes to behavioral safety. You want them to self-discover that this is the thing to do. So with that, you know, I'm willing to answer any questions. I'm also willing to be a resource for anybody on the call. I've written a plan. I actually have a plan that HBA has, but I've also taken a plan and written one for general industry, and I'm willing to share that with anyone. So, so that I'll just, I guess, turn it back over to Brenda.
Thank you, Randy. And Lee, would you like to share your insight for our folks today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank Randy. Randy did about 3 weeks ago a town hall for our members, did a terrific job on this. Echoing a little bit of what Randy said, this is a time thing. This is going to go on for a considerable amount of time until we get a vaccine. This threat is going to be out there. And construction, whether it's commercial construction or residential construction, is probably one of the most heavily regulated industries out there. A lot of what we're going to talk about in terms of prevention is already in the MIOSHA rules, is already done. But as Randy said, a plan is just a piece of paper. There's got to be accountability, and that accountability works both ways. If you're the general contractor, you have to make sure your subs are following procedures as well. We really think some of the stuff is basic. The biggest changes I think that we're going to see have to do with screening people, making sure that no one who is sick or has been exposed comes onto the work site. And there's procedures in place for that. You're going to see it in terms of sanitation. There's going to be a lot more sanitation required than has been required before, because this is a virus, and you can pick this virus up just about anywhere. And then you're going to see it a little bit, as Randy talked about, in record keeping. There's a lot of suggestions that have gone on how to do this. Randy had mentioned a plan that was put together by the Consumer Industry Safety Coalition, which is 15 of the largest construction trade associations in the nation, and they put together a plan, and then we sent that plan over to the Michigan Occupational Health and Safety Administration. They worked with us to bring that into line with Michigan, including putting some of the Michigan rules in there. It's available on our website, HBA of Michigan, michiganallspelledout.com. But Randy has been a good resource. We want to be a good resource. We've been pushing this safety issue for almost a month now. And the reason for that is we're going back to work in the construction industry because we are a low risk, low exposure industry. But if we slack off on safety precautions, we're going to see it shut down again. So we think it's very important for everybody out there in all the industries, not just construction, to take every precaution that's out there to make sure that you stay on top of the requirements. Randy?
Yeah, and thanks, Lee, for that. I really enjoyed, you know, the HBA having me do that that workshop, and I believe is a presentation on the website as well. I mean, if somebody wanted to take the time, and because basically it's an hour-long recorded webinar where I actually went through each particular point. And if any of you are interested, just get on the website and you can get the information there.
Yeah, it's there and it's great.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that you know, doing research for my training and things like that, I happened to come across. I mean, pandemic. This isn't a new thing, and actually they tend to last 2 years. So, like Lee said, unless they come up with a vaccine, this is going to be with us for a while. And it's interesting. I found where. Well, I was born in 1957, so if you do some research, and if any of you that were born around that time or earlier, actually 1957 there was a pandemic, a flu, and it lasted about 2 years, and actually over 100,000 people in the United States died during that time. And so when I found that information, I actually called my mother, who fortunately still living. She's in her 80s, and I asked my mother, "Mom," I said, "do you remember that?" She says, "Yeah, just vaguely." I said, "Did they shut everything down during that time?" She says, "Oh no, they didn't do that." So, but and then the other one to compare to is this is one that goes back to 1981, the AIDS epidemic. 35 million people have actually died from that worldwide. There is no vaccine, and they've got some really good drugs and so on. People live with it, but it's really a big thing. Of course, then you hear the Spanish flu. Back to this now, the greatest thing that could ever happen is if they come up with a vaccine. That would make a big difference.
And you know, with the governor announcing today at 3 o'clock, hopefully, that she's opening up residential and commercial construction. It's more important than ever that everybody be prepared to go back to work safely by May 7th. And that includes having the proper personal protective equipment on. There's a lot of misunderstandings on what's required. N95 masks are not required except in special circumstances. And we can get into a little bit of that here, because as I said, there are a lot of areas that are myths that people think are true. So, Randy?
Yeah, I think the thing I would emphasize more than ever is that, you know, don't be complacent. This is an invisible situation. And, you know, obviously we don't want this thing to get out of control. I mean, when you look at the data as far as the danger of somebody dying, as I've been watching the data, it's people under 50 are really very unlikely to be hospitalized from this. It's really the high risk population. So, you know, but again, you know, you can be exposed to this somewhere, you can bring it home. And you could expose someone, a loved one, to it. But I think the other thing that we need to think about from a human resource side of things is when we go back to work, I just think it's going to just take a lot of empathy and flexibility, because from the research I've done, and I will tell you from the experience we're having here with our offices, you know, half the people are really scared yet of this. And you know, then we've got the whole issue of, you know, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, that type of thing. And we just need to, just have a lot of empathy, because it's going to take some people some time to get their confidence back and get things rolling again.
Yeah, and you know, construction workers tend to think they have superpowers. They're tough and they don't have to worry about this, and it's just a little virus. I mean, that certainly isn't true. And as Randy said, you pick it up at a job site, you pick it up at a store, you pick it up somewhere, you're carrying it to your family, you're carrying it to others. We all have to be aware of this as this is going on. Randy, should we take some questions?
Sure, let's start with some questions.
Yeah, so we do have one right off the bat here, and it is, as we get back to working, what programs are being worked on for inspections to happen as soon as possible?
Randy, if you don't mind, I'll take that, because I've been talking with the department and with Kim Gaddeke about that. Where there are building departments that have closed down, most of them have done so based upon the interpretation of the governor's order by their attorney, their government attorney, the township, their county, their village, their city attorney tells them they can't be open. That's simply not true. The state has been open through all this. The state has been doing inspections. We have been in contact with the governor's office and with the deputy director, Kim Gaddeke, of the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. A good number of building departments around the state have remained open through this and have been issuing permits and doing inspections. We've asked that the executive order include the fact that building departments are in fact essential, because I don't know how you do construction without them, and we will see what happens. We've also been pushing, and we've sent things in on procedures. It's allowable under the building code to do visual inspections. We've had a number of, Ann Arbor, for example, have done inspections using FaceTime, using video conferencing. So on that, at that point, there will be some things that the local departments will put together to make sure that their people are safe. But we think that the governor's order is going to say, okay, everybody back to work on this one.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lee. I think the other thing is, as we do business, you know, for myself, you know, I've been doing face-to-face sales and insurance work for 40 years plus, and this is a big culture shock. So this week I actually had my first face-to-face meeting. You know, insurance is considered essential, and we had to get together. But what I've been doing is, and you may try this yourself if you're getting out and visiting with folks, is just be sensitive, give them options. You know, I've been saying we can do a phone call, we can do a Zoom call, we can do a face-to-face with social distancing, and that's what they chose to do. So how this worked was we went into a conference room. I sat on one end of the table, another gentleman sat, you know, over 6 feet away from me, and then his father was there as well. His father had a mask on because he's at higher risk, and it went great. But again, be sensitive to what everybody is feeling. And same point for your work site. You have a lot of potential traffic on that work site. Just think about if you're there working and the family that you've been working with on the house all of a sudden shows up with their whole family. As a general contractor, you're responsible for that work site. You may have to, you know, say, hey, you know, this is while we're working here, you know, this is the way our space has to stay. Really, you can't be here right now. And the same way with suppliers, I know that there's a lot of discussion about how do you get your supplies safely, because what you got to remember is that you may be, you and your crew are on one work site, your supplier is dropping, they're at several work sites, so you really don't know where they are. So it's going to take vigilance just to really feel comfortable that you can direct what is going on. Give your employees the power to do the same thing. That way everybody stays safe.
Yeah, and I know I'm a member of the Code Officials Conference of Michigan and the International Code Council. International Code Council has sent a letter to the state of Michigan emphasizing how important it is that building departments be reopened. The Code Officials Conference of Michigan understands that. They have themselves as an organization been looking at some ways to do this. And Randy's right, it's flexibility. You're still going to have building officials and building inspectors that, while they may be comfortable looking at some exterior work, they might not be as comfortable going inside the house and looking at remodeling. And so you got to work with them. But there are a number of tools that are out there for them to use.
Perfect. I do have a few more. I just, you know, also want to remind people, if you have questions that are coming to your mind, to please use the chat box here and throw them in. We'll make sure we get them answered. But Lee, this is for you. You mentioned earlier that there was some myths going on that a lot of people are confused with. So specific to this industry, what do you think some of those are? You know, is it that people think certain things are required that might not be, or vice versa?
People think that there are requirements that aren't there. That's probably the biggest one that we're dealing with. And I mentioned the N95 masks because CDC says don't use these unless it's absolutely necessary. You just follow the regular procedures for that. There is some interest in what kind of paperwork you need to keep. You know, you don't have to keep paperwork to a huge degree, but we'd advise everybody, for example, that before anybody goes on your website, or excuse me, your work site, what you do is you make sure that they have no symptoms of COVID-19. You go through that checklist, you check it off. You can do this electronically, so you avoid transmission by paper. You make sure that, again, there's nothing that keeps you from ride sharing, but you need to minimize ride sharing as much as possible. We'll see more of these as they come on, because it's amazing the number of things that are out there that may not, in fact, be accurate.
Yeah. As far as the masks are concerned, Lee, the N95 is a very good mask, but the reason that they're not recommending you use one is because our medical providers need those. And as far as the other masks, what I'm seeing out there is just people aren't wearing them properly. They're just going through the motions. Their nose is exposed. I mean, it's just to say they got one. And then the other thing I would caution somebody about is if they're using a mask, they should clean it, wash it every day, because you really don't want to take that same mask and wear it the next day if it's a cloth mask, because you could end up contaminating yourself worse. And then also, when taking the mask on and off, be very careful that how you take it on and off, that you're not contaminating yourself. So things like that is good to know.
Perfect. What do you both see as the biggest barrier for this industry as they do go back to work?
I would say the biggest is going to be the behavior. I mean, that's what it always is with safety. It's behavioral, and there are some techniques you can use. One that is really effective, I've used it, shared it, is if you want to make a little game out of it, you just take a spreadsheet, put the name of all your people on it, and then go based on the days. And if you show up at the job site and they all have their PPE on, you give them a green square. It's no yellow, it's no red, it's either there or it isn't. And then at the end of that day, you can add up what percentage of compliance you had. And I always say it's best to criticize in private and praise in public. And if you say to the whole group, hey, this is our weekly report, we've got 70% compliance on our PPE, can we do better? And of course, it's the person that isn't green square that's saying, I can do better. So we use that with safety glasses all the time, but just try to think of ways that you can make it simple to keep track of, but encourage people to comply, because to get 100% compliance, we need it, but we got to keep watching that. When I do a lot of employee interviews for safety, and when I explain this, I say that there's policies, procedures, and controls. So I'll ask the employee, what do you think about your policies, procedures, and controls? Policies are written, they're usually on a shelf, they'll be on your job site, maybe in the glove box. That's easy. I mean, you can go on the website at HBA and get one, easy. The procedures is how you do things. That's a little more difficult. And then the controls is what happens if somebody doesn't do that? How do you handle that? So that's my advice when it comes to that, but behavioral safety.
I think the other challenge is going to be getting people to go back to work. And it's not necessarily tied into the unemployment extensions. It's making sure that they feel comfortable when they come back to work. And that's something an employer has to be very, as Randy said, very empathetic to. You are going to have some employees that are going to be worried about their health. And you need to be able to show them that you're taking the proper measures, and actually be taking the proper measures to make sure they're working safe. I mean, we're getting from the construction industry, ABC and home builders worked hard to get us in this first wave of reopenings. But now it's going to be up to contractors, subcontractors, to make sure that they're following the procedures. They're making sure that their employees are working safely.
Yeah. I talked to my OSHA inspector last week. He helped go through some of the plans, and they've been working diligently, working on complaints. They're getting a lot of complaints in. So it's just, my OSHA is going to be watching closely. I mean, they've got this whole division that is a kinder and gentler side. They really want to help, but they're going to be watching this very closely. And I think one of the first things they're going to ask when they get a complaint is, let me see your COVID-19 response plan. And that's why it's so important. You got to have that with you on site.
That's super helpful. Thank you both. Oh, go ahead, Lee.
I was going to say the other thing is education, and Randy knows this too. You've got to educate your employees. It's not just enough to have it, as Randy says, on a piece of paper. all the employees that are entering on that work site have to understand what the plan is, have to understand what the signs of COVID-19 are, have to understand what they need to do on that site to protect themselves. There's some things that'll be different for builders right now. Where on sites where you have porta potties, there's going to be much more need to sanitize those porta potties. You're going to have MyOSHA wants running water and soap available, and only as a necessary alternative, use the sanitary wipes to wash your hands. We've suggested people get a 10-gallon Igloo water cooler, use that for water, and have foaming soap, foaming antibacterial soap. It's all about being safe, making your employees feel safe, and that's really going to be a key to what happens with us.
Yeah, think it through. I'll just give you what I do here. And I think a lot of this is going to carry over. I mean, will help us a lot during flu season, because what we can plan on is, as people start getting back out there, we could have a flare up, and that they really expect it. I mean, the whole reason that we're doing the social distancing and stay at home is not to overwhelm the healthcare system. And we've been successful there. The key is we don't want to get such a flare up that we have danger of doing that again. If that happens, then we'll be set back. But if I leave the office and just get a sandwich, I get in my car, I go through the drive-through. I'm dealing with money and everything. I'm getting it from the person. So I take the package, and I've got a little bit of sanitizer in my car. I do my hands there. And I head back to the office, come into the office, sit down at my desk, and a little bit more sanitizer there. And if you just think about what you're doing, it really is pretty easy. Now, obviously when you're on a job site, it's a little bit different. You got porta potties, and that's what Lee was saying is people, and then getting gas. I think the governor even said that was one thing that she felt was a big reason that she was really concerned people getting out, going to get gas. Well, you get gas, take the paper towel from the holder, hold it on there so you're not touching that, and then sanitize your hands when you get back in the car, and just little things like that.
Yeah, sanitize the tools after every use. I mean, a lot of tools are in common use there, but after one person uses them, even if you've got gloves, it's a good idea to sanitize. When you get home, make sure you take your clothes off, make sure you wash them. You don't bring them into the house to potentially contaminate your home. So there are a lot of things. And of course, if you look at any of the information that's out there, be it Randy's stuff, be it the stuff we've put out, you'll see a whole list of these things and should be following them.
I was just thinking about the gloves from a cross-contamination standpoint, so I'm happy you said that. Looks like we don't have any more questions coming in the chat section. So I kind of just wanted to ask you both, and this might have already been addressed, but what are the most common questions that you've been getting since we've fallen into this new world here with COVID? I know people are coming to you on a daily basis. So what are you getting the most of right now?
When are we going back to work? When are we going back to work? Why can't we go back to work?
Yeah, the ones that I'm getting are just, human resource related. And, there were so many of these acts that were put out for the payroll protection, and then the CARES Act, and all the Family Leave Act. We deal with those all the time. And so those were pretty common questions. But as far as the safety programs, there's a lot of teams right now that if they haven't started, they are working on these particular plans. And if you haven't started working on one and you're still not scheduled to open your work site yet, now's the time to do it. There's great resources out there, but you're going to need to be prepared from day one. The other thing is, where do I get the supplies? Where do I get sanitizer? Where do I get PPE? That is going to be a tough one. I mean, I bought 10 gallons of sanitizer. It's the liquid, not the gel. The gel is in short supply, so a lot of it is distilled and it's in liquid. I just wanted to buy the 2-ounce spray bottles, and I put an order in last week, and They said the middle of June, maybe later. So, you know, that's an issue. But I do think sanitizer, if you look, is getting to be more and more readily available. What have you heard, Lee?
Yeah, we're starting to see more sanitizer, although the FDA is getting in the way because they're now claiming that you need to put all of the distilleries that are doing this, you need to put a bittering in there, otherwise kids will be drinking the sanitizer. We actually made our own here using a formula from Allison Distillery in the Lansing area. And what we did with it was it is 60% 91 alcohol. It's 6% hydrogen peroxide, and then aloe vera gel and water. More water than aloe vera gel. And I have about 10 bottles of alcohol, isopropyl alcohol around the place, because when I garden, I pour it on my hands. If I get a scratch, I use it when I'm painting. And it is available in a lot of the areas. So, you know, if you get into a real tough spot, you can make your own. But the thing is, if you're just talking about the individual, the best thing is soap and water, and wash your hands for 20 seconds and rinse them.
Perfect.
Somebody had a question about gloves, and I used to work in food processing, so sanitation was, you know, what we did. And, you know, donning and doffing those gloves was huge. How you did it, just make sure that you're not contaminating, you know, when you're putting the glove on and off is a big thing. And, you know, healthcare workers know how to do this. If you're not sure how to do it, I think CDC has good information on it as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that that you want to do is make sure you have a common trash area with a bag in there that people can discard the gloves in, discard the wipes in. You can't just leave them lying around anywhere. And then at the end of the day, seal that up and dispose of it.
That's a great point. Yep, especially with people leaving them lying around. We did actually have 2 more questions come in. I just want to make sure we get them answered. Someone asked, the protection measures will increase costs. Have there been any talk on ways to keep the playing field level in terms of that, especially when it comes to bidding on projects?
Not that I know of. Most of these protection measures shouldn't cost a lot. You should already have PPE available for your workers. You know, you'll have to ask people about their health status on that. Now, if you've got COVID exposure, as Randy was talking about, you could have pretty much your entire work crew in quarantine on that. Another reason to make sure that you've got these in place. But no, Randy, you can comment on that too from your perspective.
I've had that question come up quite a bit, and I have not seen where anybody's been able to put a surcharge or charge in for that. So that's all I know at this point. I mean, with this, there isn't a lot of data out there when it comes to how this is all going to go down. But like I would agree with Lee, you know, once you get some kits put together, it isn't a huge cost item. And you know, again, for long term, there's a huge cost in flu, people losing work at flu, and the reason we got to be really super vigilant, especially into going into this flu season, is we could have this flare up and the flu flare up at the same time. So that's one of the concerns I've heard. So you know, it's good for those of you that believe in flu shots. It's a good opportunity to make sure that you're vigilant about getting them this year and doing whatever you can to avoid that.
Yeah, and on the gloves issue, it just this comes off of the COVID-19 plan that I've referred, and this language came from MIOSHA, that gloves should be worn at all times while on site. The type of glove worn should be appropriate to the task. Cloth gloves shall not be worn when operating rotating equipment such as a drill or a powered threading machine. If gloves are not typically required for the task, then any type of glove is acceptable, including nitrile, latex, or vinyl gloves. Employees should not share gloves, and eye protection should be worn at all times while on the site.
Someone did also ask if a list, can Randy send out a list of what should go in a kit?
Sure. I have one, so I can certainly do that. Just let me know, how to do that, and I can send it up to you, one of you folks that are running this, and then you can send it out to everybody. But yes, I do. On the safety committee at ABC, we've got a pretty robust committee of conversations going back and forth, and I have some pretty good lists there I can send over.
Yeah, Randy, if Randy can send me that list, and I will be sure to email that out to all of you today after this webinar is over. And it looks like the last question we had come in is there somewhere that we can access a sample exposure prevention response plan?
One is available on our website, www.hbaofmichigan.com. If you go there, go to our COVID-19 page, you can download the Michiganized COVID plan that we work with MIOSHA on, and it comes from the Construction Industry Safety Coalition, and I'm sure ABC has something similar.
Yep. Yeah, they do. But what I would also say, if you're not specific to construction, that plan is a good base plan. I've taken that particular plan, and you just have to make it specific for your site, but the principles are all there. So if somebody has a struggle, if you know how to get a hold of me, you can certainly ask. I can certainly help on that aspect.
Perfect. Well, we definitely want to be respectful of both of your times. So the last thing I want to ask you both is, do you have any words of advice for this industry moving forward? What are your final thoughts you want to leave with them today?
I'll start, and Lee, if you want to finish up. But one of my biggest concerns is a single focus. And this is a single focus. That's all you hear about. But this is not the only safety issue you have. All the other issues are still there, and I'm really concerned about distraction, especially as we ramp up. So next week, if you're orienting your folks and bringing out this COVID plan, now's the time to dust off your regular safety plan. You got to remember, people are coming back to work rusty. They may not be work hardened because they've been sitting around for a couple of weeks and distracted, and they're working with different protocols and maybe working with different crew members. So treat this startup like a new employee orientation. That first few days, be so vigilant, because I saw a big spike. I think we had one fatality in Michigan through February, and we had I think 4 just before we all got shut down. Not all from construction, but it's just people were starting to get distracted then. So I'm just really concerned about that. So just be vigilant. And with the driving, I will tell you, based on my driving around Grand Rapids area, traffic is picking up. Saw a real bad accident with a couple of trucks here this week. People, some of them haven't been driving in traffic much the last few weeks. They're distracted. So just be super careful.
Yeah, and what was it? I read in the paper, they stopped the guy on 94 doing 180 miles an hour through a little fast, guys.
Yeah.
I think this is what I want everybody to understand. And we've been preaching it to our folks. We in ABC worked very hard, used every lever, every bit of influence we know that we have to get construction opened in this first wave, both residential and commercial. If we have people who are not following guidelines for COVID, if we have people who are not putting safety first, and as Randy said, not just COVID, look at fall protection, look at the other issues, we're going to get shut down again. And when we get shut down again, we're going to be shut down for a long time. So our associations have done our job. We've gotten back to work. We've given the information out to members and non-members alike, and it's going to be up to every company and every employer and every employee to make sure that they have a safe workplace.
Very well put. Well, we just want to thank you both so much for all of your, insight and information that you were able to provide today. If anyone has any additional questions for Randy, Lee, or anyone at Traverse Connect team, feel free to send me an email and I can make sure I get any and all questions directly sent over to them. So again, we just want to thank you so much, Randy and Lee, for being here with us today.
Thanks, it was a pleasure.
Yep, thank you.
Everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful weekend.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.